Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. Through our first bleed to our last, we come to know ourselves more deeply. This is a platform to reclaim the sacredness of all of it. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach, specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to the Moon Baby Magic podcast. I'm your host, Natalie, and I'm so excited to bring you this episode today. But first, just to orient you to where I am in time and space, as always, and invite you to do the same. So today is Wednesday, October 8th. It's 11:06 a.m. Pacific time for me. And I'm on cycle day 23, dropping into that luteal feels. And I'm in Nevada City, California, my new home. You know, the reason I always do this at the beginning of every episode, I do this with every guest when we record as well, is because it's so important to remember where you are in time and space. That creates a baseline safety in your body, which allows everything to function more optimally. Today we're getting into my food story, and this was recorded back in March when I was living on the big island of Hawaii, one of my favorite places I've ever lived, in Puna. I just absolutely loved it there. And you can see it in the vibrancy of my face. I mean, I still feel pretty vibrant, but it was like tropical goddess energy. And I wanted to share this video. It's actually the first module or the first video in the Nourishment module of Moon Cycle Mastery, which is my new course, which I have officially launched now. I know I sort of teased it in the Yoni steaming episode, but I hosted that free class, Your Cycle Decoded. If you really want the replay for that, you can message me and I'll get it to you, but it did already go out. And I launched Moon Cycle Mastery, and Moon Cycle Mastery is a self-paced course, and so you can get it at any time. But what I want to say before we get into today's episode is that I wanted to really offer you all something special, because this course has taken a lot of energy. I mean, as I said, I recorded this video back in March. And so I've been recording videos and adding to this course and making sure it covers what I think are every step that every woman who is dealing with any hormonal imbalance needs to take. And so it's only just now finished, and I'm really proud of it. And I guess what I'll say is my prayer is really that just whoever is meant to be in the space of Moon Cycle Mastery has the resources to be in it. And because I wanted to offer as much as I possibly can, for the first 48 hours of it launching, so until 10 p.m., Thursday, October 9th, Pacific time, I'm offering a free 90-minute one-on-one session to anyone who joins Moon Cycle Mastery. When you join Moon Cycle Mastery, you also get added to my membership. So you get community too, even though it's not a live course. And the community does have twice monthly calls. So there's so much packed in for $297. It's actually over $1,300 value for that price. And I really hope that if you are meant to be in that space, that you give yourself permission to join. So today, I am releasing the first video in the Nourishment module. So Moon Cycle Mastery is designed into 5 phases and some bonus phases, just like the moon. And one of the phases is nourishment. And so all of these phases kind of build on one another, and they each go into depth of working through specific challenges and education that I've gone through with clients that usually take me like 4 or 5 months or more with clients, but it's all in this course for the price of what would be like 2 sessions. So it's really great. And the Nourishment module starts out with my food story. And so I thought I would just share my food story with you so you can get a taste of what my approach to nutrition is. And of course, the course goes into much more detail about specific ways, specific foods, eating for your cycle. And I also go deeply into the education, because this course is not just designed to be like me telling you what to do. It is a step-by-step protocol to heal that's worked with dozens of clients. but it's also designed to educate you so that you can be your own healer. So there's a lot in there about how to start to understand different patterns, especially from the traditional Chinese medicine lens. So a lot of women who joined have PCOS. And there's a very specific way to handle PCOS from the TCM perspective. And that sort of breaking down and understanding what's actually going on is in the course. The one thing I want to add to my food story here is I talk about the different phases. So funny. It's always about the moon, isn't it? I talk about the different phases, and I said like my vegan chapter was like phase 2, and then my ancestral eating was like phase 3. And one thing I want to add as perhaps almost a phase 4 that I didn't speak to in this video that was recorded back in March is that now I'm at a place where, yes, I do eat ancestrally, but I'm also aware that in order to assimilate a nutrient dense diet, you have to do baseline gut healing. And so that is a video that I have added to Moon Cycle Mastery, or kind of information I have added to Moon Cycle Mastery woven into videos of how to prepare your gut to actually receive the nourishment from your food. Because if you're eating the best diet ever and you're still having symptoms like painful periods, irregular cycles, not getting pregnant, PMS, then it could be your gut. So all that to say that Moon Cycle Mastery is a living course. I I'm a very passionate person and a very passionate being. And so if I learn something new, I get very excited and I want to teach everyone about it. So as I learn and develop my skill set, I will be adding more content to Moon Cycle Mastery. The price will likely increase because of that, but if you get in now, you're going to have the same price forever and get access to all updates. So all that to say, I highly recommend joining now while it's new and fresh and at the lowest cost it will ever be. And especially if you want a free 90-minute session with me, joining in the next 24 hours. Is there anything else I want to say here? Yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say is something I mentioned in the webinar is like, my goal for you is that you get to a point in your healing where you don't have to be so intense about food. One of my favorite things about my healing journey is that now I enjoy like going out and getting a latte, and like going out at night and salsa dancing and staying up late. Those, of course, aren't things that I would do at the beginning of my healing journey, but they're the point of the healing journey, is that you can relax and live a full life, and not have to think about your diet and your sleep so much because you're resilient to it. That is the outcome that I want for you after Moon Cycle Mastery. So I hope you join in, and I hope you enjoy my food story today. This goes into from when I was a little girl and now up till now. So if you resonate, I would love to hear from you. If you have questions about Moon Cycle Mastery, I would love to hear from you as well. If you want to work one-on-one, you can find all of those links in the show notes as well. And if you are a fan of the show, do me a favor and rate and review. It is like the one thing that gets podcasts traction, because my podcast isn't a money-making endeavor. Your support to get it out to more women, to get my visibility up, and also just to support my mission of teaching as many women as possible about their cycle and that they deserve symptom-free cycles. Please rate and review. It would really, really mean a lot to me. All right, lots of love. Let's get into my food story. My food story. I felt like this was an important addition to the material for the nutritional week because I think that I've been through so many of diet culture fads, and I've been on a pretty like typical trajectory of what a lot of women have experienced when it comes to the evolution of eating and what it means to eat a healthy diet. And yeah, in other videos, we're going to get really into deconstructing what healthy means and things like that. But this is my personal story. And I think that as women, we learn from story. Story really is medicine for us. And so that's why I wanted to include this in the content for the week. So I guess the best place to start is my childhood. And when I was a kid, like probably many of you, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, and my diet was full of processed foods. I mean, we were eating lean cuisines, we were eating Hot Pockets, we were eating McDonald's after school. When I think about like, did I have protein? I'm like, God, what did I eat for breakfast? Like cereal, just like plain sugar. It's kind of what we call like a standard American diet. A standard American diet has a lot of refined carbohydrates. It has a lot of sugar. Most people on a standard American diet have extremely dysregulated blood sugar because we need protein to build our blood sugar, a healthy blood sugar balance. We need protein paired with all of our carbs. But in the US, unfortunately, the food pyramid is such that we think that things like red meat and eggs and milk and butter are going to kill us. And instead, we should have low fat yogurt and white bread. And Lucky Charms is healthier than steak. Needless to say, that's not what I agree with anymore. But that was kind of the diet I grew up on. And um, I also went through quite a phase of like really restricting calories. I remember a time when I was, gosh, it's sad to think of how young I was. I was probably in seventh or eighth grade, where I would count all of my calories and make myself get to a calorie deficit every day. I would swim laps in my pool until I burned off the piece of multigrain toast with almond butter that I ate as my lunch that day. Um, yeah, it's quite sad. It's interesting too, though, because I also remember when I was a little bit younger, maybe like 10, I tried to eat more because I soft lower belly. Um, and I don't know where that came from. And my only guess is that it must have been this instinctual knowing that as women, we're supposed to have soft lower bellies. That's where our wombs live, right? So that's a little sweet part of the story. Yeah, anyways, this was my typical diet. We ate Subway, like just like very standard American, unhealthy, lots of carbs. And to be fair, I don't think carbs are bad. I just think it's important that we pair them with protein and that we have the right carbs, that like perhaps a sweet potato or some white rice is better than white bread and processed sugar and Lucky Charms. Or fresh fruit, right? Fresh fruit is so good for us. So, yeah, flash forward to high school, and I was a little bit insecure. I was a little bit insecure, especially my freshman year of high school. I went to a high school and I didn't know that many people because the school I had gone to previously was only up until eighth grade. And so there was these cool girls, right? It all starts with the cool girls. And my sophomore year, the cool girls were reading a book called Skinny Bitch. And if you don't know about the book Skinny Bitch, it's a book about veganism and how it makes you skinny. And back then, I had no concept that like being skinny didn't equal being healthy because that's such a cultural message that like being skinny equals being healthy. Now I know that that's not true, but I did not then. And I was so young. This diet culture really seeps in when we're young. And I think it's important to acknowledge and honor that. So I actually didn't read the book Skinny Bitch, but I watched a documentary called Earthlings. And Earthlings was all about the harm that's done to animals for food consumption. And I watched that documentary at school during my study hall period for a week and sobbed. I had and continue to have such a soft, tender heart for animals. And when I recognized that some of the conditions that animals were in were abusive, like quite abusive in the factory farming situations, the animals are not tended to well, not respected. They're stuffed in cages, like they're not given access to sunlight and grass. And I watched this, and in that moment, I decided I was going to be a vegan because I saw even the cows who were getting milked were in these crazy conditions, and animals aren't meant to live like that. I knew somewhere in my deep heart that animals were meant to be free, and they should not be like locked away in stalls. I think we all know that. We're part of nature. So I continue on my vegan journey in growing up in Oklahoma. It was not easy. Growing up in my family, it was not easy, but I stayed devoted to it. And I'll say I ate probably a lot of substitute meats, which are filled with artificial ingredients, a lot of substitute cheeses, although actually back then, not a lot of substitute cheeses, or actually, I don't think any existed when I was in high school, but substitute meats like Gardein chicken nuggets or whatever, like I was eating those. My sister was also, she was vegetarian. And so we were all on that train and, corn and soy products and still no real knowledge of like nutrition. And that really wasn't even initially where the veganism came from. Though, I continued this vegan journey until all the way until I went to college. And my senior year of high school and going into college is when I really got into yoga. And then I got a job at a smoothie shop called Sun Life Organics in California that was all focused on superfoods and supplements. And they weren't actually all vegan. They actually did sell bone broth. And at the time, I thought it was absolutely disgusting and refused to pour it into the cups. It cracks me up because I drink bone broth every morning now and I make my own bone broth. Um, yeah, how things change. So that's a little sneak peek of the story of where this is going. But yeah, I continued the veganism and it sort of did start to morph not just about animal rights, but to about health. I truly believed that by putting these like living foods in my body, like fresh vegetables, raw fruits, raw vegetables, all of these superfoods like goji berries, which I still think goji berries are great. They're incredible for your kidneys, but maca and spirulina and chia seeds and all these seeds and nut butters. And um, I think I equated lightness. And most of us will think, like, when we think of healthy food, most people think of like a smoothie and a salad, like, oh, I ate a healthy meal. But it really requires like redefining, like, what do you mean by health? Because if you're drinking a smoothie that's fruit juice and fruit and ice, and you're having a salad that's greens and vegetables, you have zero protein in that meal and it's going to dysregulate your blood sugar like crazy. Whereas, of course, like you could have a smoothie and maybe your smoothie has like some dates and it has some collagen and it's got some raw milk. And then your salad is like a quinoa chicken. That's better. But still, like we have to really reframe. But I was in that place. So I call this like the stage two healing, like from the standard American diet to this idea that like light food, cold food, raw food, veganism is healthy. And that's healthier. And there's all these documentaries like Game Changers about athletes going vegan and vegan influencers on Instagram. And I I can only share from my experience, but veganism depleted me. And I can say this from a place of truly trying it. I was vegan for 10 years, if you can believe it. I was vegan when I was 15, and I stopped being vegan when I was 25. I am 28 now, and so I'm 3 years out of it. But my experience being vegan, I lost a ton of weight. I did. I got skinny. Not immediately, not when I was eating like the processed stuff. But eventually when I got to college and I started cooking my own meals and working at the smoothie shop, I was eating a lot of like healthy vegan food, like all of the supplements I talked about or superfoods I talked about. And I was eating sweet potatoes and black beans and quinoa and kale and chickpeas and avocado, like pretty healthy foods. They're not bad foods at all. But at this time, I also had an extremely dysregulated cycle. I wasn't even ovulating, which I didn't discover until I was 26 or 25. That was the thing that triggered me, but I'll get there in a moment. I was riddled with anxiety, and I didn't even recognize how dysregulated my nervous system was back then because I was just so used to it. And I think until you feel the groundedness of being at ease with yourself, you don't necessarily recognize that before you weren't in that place. And so that was my case. But I had extremely toxic patterns. I had a really deep inability to like be with myself through big emotions and would often project that energy onto partners or to friends or to my parents. And these are things that I didn't recognize until I started, getting my blood sugar regulated by eating a whole food animal-based diet. But now I can see so clearly that blood sugar really impacts your nervous system. We have blood sugar receptors everywhere. We have them on our ovaries. Blood sugar impacts ovulation. So that impacts your hormonal flow. It really impacts so much. And dysregulated blood sugar creates mental chaos. That's just how it works. Our brain needs healthy blood sugar levels to function. So I started feeling I'd lost a ton of weight, especially in like 2020 and 2021, kind of at the tail end of the vegan journey for me when I was freshly out of college. I had extremely dysregulated blood sugar, and I started recognizing that even though I was pretty skinny, I was so exhausted. Like I was sleeping a ton, and then I would be anxious. And I actually I was skinny, but like I couldn't lift anything. Like I had zero muscle tone. My periods were insanely painful. My cycles were irregular. Um, And the biggest thing, I started to notice that my hands were like yellow. And so that has to do with like liver, blood sugar, bilirubin levels. And I remember thinking, like, this can't be right. And so I started doing some digging, and I eventually found this group of a collection of videos of people who were not vegan. And it was called the Confessions of an Ex-Vegan series. It was done by Katya Nova on Instagram. That specific program that she created was incredible. It was all these women, some of them just their personal experiences like me, and some of them sharing their knowledge on nutrition and circadian biology and blood sugar and the psychological impacts of being vegan, which one of them was like your nervous system, thinking like as humans, the natural order is we are predators. And when we over identify with prey by eating a vegan diet and putting ourselves below the food chain of like rabbits, which we're not, what does that do to your psyche of being prey? And that's also a big shift I've noticed is my level of confidence and security within myself after not being on a vegan diet anymore. So I bought this program and it initially insanely triggered me. Um, but for about a year, I like really let it percolate. I had started working with a fertility awareness method practitioner who had informed me I was not ovulating and encouraged me to start eating meat. And that was kind of the moment that I was like, wow, my body is not healthy. And I can either stick to this identity I've created around veganism, or I can make a change to support my body. So I started with raw dairy. I started with raw cream, and then I started with some eggs. I made it fun for myself. I made these like yogurt parfaits with raw dairy and berries and really like treated it like I was nourishing myself as a goddess. I went slow. I went really slow. Like I think I only eggs for like a month, and then I started adding in dairy. And then I ate oysters, which was my first venture into animal foods, which is so funny because oysters are like so slimy and I ate them raw. But I just like, I was in this for my health, you know? And oysters have incredible levels of zinc and B12 and are so good for egg quality and ovulation and your fertility. And so I ate the oysters, and I'm not gonna lie, it was hard. It was hard to do it, but ultimately, and this is still the case every time I eat an email or every time every time I eat an animal. I just did this eating my lunch. It's like I say the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono prayer, and that is, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And I say that because I am sorry. I am sorry that for me to live, death has to occur. And I ask for forgiveness. And I know that I get forgiveness because all intelligent life knows the right order of things, even if it's brutal, because nature is brutal. And I say, I love you because I am so grateful to the animals who are giving me their life force energy so that I can do good with that energy. And it's also what motivates me to do good with my life, that I am receiving this life force and it's my responsibility to then do good with it. So eventually, the first meal I cooked for myself with meat that wasn't like seafood was an ancestral recipe. And I say ancestral because it was my grandmother's chicken tortilla soup recipe. And it included chicken and tortillas and avocado and cream. And I really spent a good amount of time connecting with the women in my lineage who nourished themselves and being devoted to bringing that back. Because even if, you know, we see women that have like a vegan pregnancy and they can thrive and be okay, but often what happens is over time, the genetic imprint, the genetic material that we're sending to our daughters and our sons gets deteriorated without proper minerals and without proper macronutrients. And so I know that by doing this work, I am healing generations of women in my lineage who didn't know and didn't have the resources to properly nourish themselves. So, you know, the story goes eventually I began eating pork and then beef. I got into bone broth, I got into organ meats, and now I'm fully in this nourishment world. And I spent actually 2022, I made my word of the year, nourish. And that was a really deep year for me. I was cooking homemade bone broth every 3 days, and I ate every 3 to 4 hours. I made sure that I was getting 100 grams of protein a day. I had snacks when I got hungry. I only bought organic food. And I recognized that while, yes, I didn't agree with the conditions factory farmed animals were in, that I could find regenerative and grass-fed meat at the farmer's market. And so the farmer's market became my weekly practice. And I carved out a budget for good food because it mattered to me. And I can say, sitting here now in 2025, 3 years into this journey, that I do feel like a truly nourished woman. My skin is shinier, my hair is thicker, my energy levels are insane, my fertility feels like it's blooming, and I feel grounded. I remember that was the biggest thing I noticed, like 6 months, maybe a year into the journey of eating animal-based foods, was just like the level of nervous system regulation I started to feel because my body wasn't constantly pumping cortisol to give me energy anymore. I was actually giving myself energy. And that's the reality, right? If we could subsist on plant foods and be healthy, why not? Why not? But it's just not the reality of life. And one of my favorite things I heard in the confessions of a recovering vegan or ex-vegan was, you can't spiritually bypass your biology. So I think I'll leave it on that note. And I'm happy to connect with any of you who have similar stories or who have questions about my story or who are currently on this journey themselves. Thank you for tuning into the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly such an honor to bring these stories forward to you, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it could reach more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to join our online community, the Cyclical Living Circle, in the show notes below. There, you'll also find the links to book one-on-one virtual sessions, shop the herbal shop, and any group programs that I'm currently offering. Plus, you can follow me on Instagram, and I love to connect with you all there. All right, see you next week.